This is Parktown Medical Center, and this is our group presentation. My name is Denny, and I'll be introducing the first scenario and giving a brief description of our problem.
My name is Guadalupe, and I'll be introducing the document flowchart from the Parktown Medical Center.
My name is Navid, and I'll pretty much be talking about the weaknesses and the solutions of this accounting information system.
My name is Nate, and I'll be talking about how we've incorporated Navid's remarks about how to improve the security and integrity of our accounting information systems as it applies to the Parktown Medical Center Visio document flowchart.
And my name is Krystel, and I'll basically be taking all the information from them and just compiling it into a brief summary about how it started and the end result.
Thank you.
Hi, Parktown Medical Center is a publicly held healthcare provider which employs 7 physicians, 10 nurses, 3 support staff, and 3 clerical workers. There are 4 primary roles that are held within this company, which are the clerks, the physicians, the office managers, and the local accountant who comes in every month. Those 4 roles will be further introduced within the presentation. The clerks are responsible for the updating the revenue summary, the accounts receivable, and the patient accounts. Then they collect the cash from the patients, and they open the mail for the checks that we paid off in the credit. The physicians are responsible for performing these services and authorizing whether the credit is a good or a go. And the office managers are responsible for taking those checks and taking them to the bank and performing the bank reconciliation. Lastly, the local accountant will be responsible for compiling the revenue summary and the accounts receivable and posting them into the income statement, the general ledger, and the payroll. Now we'll be going into the Visio.
This is Parktown Medical Center's document flowchart. In this medical center, it is an all drop-in. There is no process for uncollectible debt, and all patients will be approved for credit if desired. So basically, a patient comes in to see a physician, and the patient can either choose to run the credit or pay cash. If the patient chooses to run the credit, the physician sets out a memo which gets sent to the clerk, and the clerk updates the accounts receivable, and this accounts receivable gets sent to the accountant. If the patient chooses to pay with cash, the patient has an appointment right away, and the physician then gives the patient a charge slip, which then gets sent to the clerk, and the clerk updates the revenue summary. And this revenue summary later on gets sent to the accountant. After the revenue summary is sent to the accountant, we start on the second process. The second process is the patient receiving a cash receipt after he or she paid from the clerk. And this cash receipt gets sent to the accountant, and the clerk is also in charge of updating the patient accounts, which gets recorded into the patient accounts database. When the clerks receive mail from customers, they are responsible for having the checks ready to be deposited. When they are ready, the checks are then sent to the office manager, and the office manager is responsible for depositing the checks and conducting a bank reconciliation. When this is done, the clerks are responsible for updating the patient accounts and also the database. And they are also responsible of updating the accounts receivable, and this accounts receivable gets sent to the accountant, and the accountant is in charge of preparing their statements, such as the general ledger and the income statements. And for the income statements, they are in charge of conducting payroll forms and tax returns.
With this AIS, we have 3 main problems. The first problem being that clerks have complete access to the patient accounts. The second problem is that for some reason, the clerks have complete custody of the cash receipts and authorization to change accounts receivable. The third problem happens to be that the physician is authorizing the credit memo. One of our first problems is that clerks have complete access to the patient accounts. That's a problem because if the clerks have complete access to the patient accounts, they'd be able to modify existing and future bills, and we wouldn't want that. And a potential solution for that would be to give the access to the patient accounts to the physician and those responsibilities as well to the physician, because that way he can update the information as soon as the services are performed. Also, the process is far more secure and we can maintain doctor-patient confidentiality that way. The second problem we have is that clerks have custody over cash receipts and the authorization to change accounts receivable. That's a problem because allowing the clerks to be able to change the accounts receivable and for them to have custody and authority is risky because fraudulent activities could occur under their watch. A clerk could be tempted to pocket a payment and make it seem like it was paid, so that's definitely something that we wouldn't want to occur. In order to fix this, we should have the physician have custody over the patient accounts because that'll allow for the clerks to be able to access the payments of the accounts but not able to bill the patients directly. Our third problem is that the physician is authorizing the credit memos. The physician should definitely not be authorizing the credit memos. The office manager should be aware of the information instead of the physician. Because the presence of the physician being the only one being able to authorize the credit memos allows for personal conflicts to become more likely. A way we could fix this is that, like I said, the office manager should be in charge of authorizing the credit memos for the patients. It fixes the problem because the financial decisions should be overlooked by the credit manager instead of the physician. This will allow for the information to be verified correctly.
Alright, so I'm going to be talking about our second stage of our Visio. So in our first one, we noticed some changes that should be made as Navid talked about earlier. The first of which being the patient accounts should be handled by the physician and not the clerks. The second was that the check and cash collection should be handled by the office manager and not by the clerks. And the third one would be the authorizing credit memo should be under the authority of the office manager and not the physician. So I'm just going to run through our Visio so you can tell the changes that we made along with how it will help our overall integrity of our system. So the first process of our system is the patient will come in and want to get authorized for credit. So what will happen is they will go to the office manager, who will then talk to the patient and decide whether or not to issue a memo for the credit. Of course, we are in a perfect world, so there is no uncollectible debt, and then all credit is authorized. So what will happen is after they authorize the credit, the memo will be then sent to the clerks, who will be updating the accounts receivable and sending that information off to the accountants. After this, the patients will then be put in charge of the physician, who will come in, perform the appointment, and issue the charge slip, which will be then sent to the clerk. From here, the clerk will update the revenue summary and send that information off to the accountants. After this, what will happen is the patients will be required to pay for the services rendered by the physician. So what will happen is instead of going to the clerks, as was in the original Visio, they will then be referred to the office manager, who will collect the cash and issue cash receipts, and that cash receipts will be sent to the accountant, and that cash receipts will also be sent to the physician, who will update the patient accounts, which will secure the confidentiality of that patient's information. From here, what will happen is mail will come in with the checks from the credit that was issued by the office manager. So here we have our mail. What will happen is the clerks will open up the mail, prepare the checks, and will write invoices and update the accounts receivable ledger. Once we have the checks will then be sent to the office manager, who will then deposit the checks and perform the bank reconciliation. And then after all this is done, what What will happen is the accounts receivable and all the other information that I went over will be sent to the accountant, and they will prepare the statements, which include our general ledger, our income statements, as well as our payroll forms and our tax returns. And so once all this is done, we'll have separation of duties from the cash and checks. So the office manager will be in charge of those, as well as performing the bank reconciliation. Our clerks will be responsible for updating the accounts receivable, and our physicians will be in charge of performing services along with updating our patient accounts, which will secure that confidential material. Thank you.
Transitioning from the original flowchart to the second, it is evident that the positions within Parktown's employees were not divided efficiently and effectively. For example, as the first flowchart explained, the clerks have full access to the patient accounts, and this means that they have authorization and custody of the same account. Not only do they have access to the patient accounts, but they also have custody of the checks and authorization of updating the accounts receivable. These are proof of poor internal controls because clerks may be tempted to clear a patient bill that was never paid, or on the contrary, the clerk may bill a patient incorrectly before a service has been performed. Rather than allowing the clerks to update accounts, open mail, and have access to patient confidential information, we have separated the duties among the office manager and physician and other clerical workers to strengthen those internal controls. Okay. Many of the issues within Parktown's Medical Center dealt with separation of duties, which by not following these procedures allows a physician to hold more power over another and further increases the possibility of fraudulent acts. A second example in the original flowchart is that the physician is authorizing a credit memo. Aside from strengthening the internal controls within Parktown, we emphasize the quality and the services among the patients and physicians. For this reason, we advise that the office manager be in charge of authorizing the credit memos. After revising Parktown's original document flowchart and creating the new and improved flowchart, we noticed the use of 1, separation of the duties of cash and checks, 2, offer a secure system of confidentiality, and 3, and overall stronger internal controls within Parktown's business.